Hello everyone, it's my turn to read you a story today, and I've chosen Michael Morpurgo's Shadow. I have been warned by a couple of members of staff at school, your teachers, that this one might be a bit emotional, but I hope we are going to enjoy it together. Shadow. When the stars begin to fall. None of it would have ever happened if it hadn't been for Grandma's tree. And that's a fact. Ever since Grandma died, that was about 3 years ago now, Grandpa had always come to spend the summer holidays at home with us up in Manchester. But this summer he said he couldn't come because he was worried about Grandma's tree. We'd all planted that tree together, the whole family, in his garden in Cambridge. A cherry tree it was, because Grandma especially loved the white blossoms in the spring. Each of us had passed around a jug and poured a little water on it to give it a good start. It's one of the family now, Grandpa had said, and that's how I'm going to look after it, always, like family. And that was why a few weeks ago, when Mum rang up and asked if he was coming to stay this summer, he said he couldn't because of the drought. There had been no rain for a month, and he was worried Grandma's tree would die. He couldn't let that happen. He had to stay at home, he said, to water the tree. Mum did her best to persuade him. Someone else could surely do that, she told him. It was no good. Then she let me have a try to see if I could do any better. That was when Grandpa said, "I can't come to you, Matt, but you could come to me. Bring your Monopoly, bring your bike, what about it?" So that's how I found myself on my first night at Grandpa's house, sitting out in the garden with him beside Grandma's tree and looking up at the stars. We'd watered the tree, had supper, fed Dog, who was sitting at my feet, which I always love. Dog is Grandpa's little brown and white spaniel with a permanently panting tongue. He dribbles a lot, but he's lovely, and it was me that named him Dog. Apparently because when I was little, Grandpa and Grandma had a little cat called Mog. The story goes that I chose the name because I liked the sound of Dog and Mog together. So he never got a proper name. Poor Dog. Anyway, Grandpa and me, we'd had our first game of Monopoly, which I'd won. And we talked and talked, but now for a while we were silent together, simply stargazing. Grandpa started to hum and then to sing. When the stars begin to fall. Oh, I can't remember the rest, he said. It's from a song Grandma used to love. I know she's up there, Matt, right now, looking down on us. On nights like these, the stars seem so close, you could almost reach out and touch them. There's a picture of Grandpa, Matt, and Dog. I could hear the tears in his voice. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing for a while. Then I remembered something. It was almost like an echo in my mind. Amman said that to me once, I told him. About the stars being so close, I mean. We were on a school trip down on a farm in Devon, and we snuck out at night, just the two of us. We went for a midnight walk, and there were all these stars up there, zillions of them. We lay down in a field and just watched them. We saw Orion, the Plough, and the Milky Way that goes on forever. He said they had never felt so free as he did in that moment. He told me then that when he was little he had first came to live in Manchester. He didn't think there were any stars in England at all. And it's true, Grandpa, you can't hardly see them so well at home in Manchester, on the account of the streetlights, I suppose. Back in Afghanistan they filled the whole sky, he said, and they felt so close, like a ceiling painted with stars. Who's Amman, Grandpa asked me. I told him before about Amman. He'd even met him once or twice, but he was inclined to forget things these days. You know, Grandpa, my best friend, I said. We were both 14 and we're even born on the same day, April 22nd. Me in Manchester and him in Afghanistan. But they're sending him back to Afghanistan. He's been to the house. You know, when you were there, I know he has. I remember him now, he said. Short fellow, big smile. What do you mean send him back? Who is? So I told him again. I was sure I told him it all before, about how Amman had come into the country as an asylum seeker 6 years before and how he couldn't speak a word of English when he first came to the school. He learned really fast too, Grandpa, I said. Amman and me, we were always in the same class in junior school and now at Belmont Academy. And you're right, Grandpa, he is small, but he can run like the wind and he plays football like a wizard. He never talks much about Afghanistan. Always says it was another life, and it's not a life he wants to remember. So I don't ask. But when Grandpa died, I found that Amman was the only one I could talk to. Maybe because I knew he was the only one who could understand. Good to have a friend like that, said Grandpa. Anyway, I went on. He's been in this prison place, him and his mum, for over 3 weeks now. I was there when they came and took him away. Like he was a criminal or something. They're keeping him locked up in there until they send him back to Afghanistan. We've written letters from the school and to the Prime Minister and to the Queen, all kinds of people, asking them to let Amman stay. They don't even bother to write back. And I've written to Amman too, lots of times. He wrote back only once, just after I got there, saying that one of the worst things about being locked up in this prison place is that he can't go out at night and look at the stars. Prison place? What do you mean prison place? Grandpa asked. Yarl something or other, I said, trying to picture the address I'd written to. Yarl's Wood, that's it. That's near here. I know it is. Not far anyway, said Grandpa. Maybe you could visit him. It's no good. They don't let kids in, I said. We asked. Mum ran up and they said it wasn't allowed. I was too young, and anyway, I don't even know if he's still there. Like I said, he hasn't written back for a while now. Grandpa and I didn't talk for some time. We were just stargazing again, and that was when I had the first idea. Sometimes I think that's where an idea must come from. The stars. Chapter 2. And they keep kids in there? I was worried about how Grandpa might react, but it was worth a try, I thought. Grandpa, I said, I've been thinking about Amman. I mean, maybe we could find out. Maybe you could ring up or something and see if he's still in there. And if he is, then you could go, Grandpa? You could go and see Amman instead of me, couldn't you? But I hardly know him, do I? Grandpa replied. What would I say? I could tell he didn't like the idea. So I didn't push it. You couldn't push Grandpa. Everyone in the family knew that. As Mum often said, he could be a stubborn old cuss. So when we sat there in silence, but all the time I knew he was thinking it over. Grandpa said nothing more about it that night, nor at breakfast the next morning. I thought that either he'd forgotten all about it, or he'd already made up his mind and he didn't want to do it. Either way, I didn't feel I could mention it again. And anyway, by now I think I had almost given up on the idea myself. It was part of Grandpa's daily routine, whatever the weather, to get up early and take the dog for a walk along the river meadows to Grantchester. His constitutional, he called it. And I know he always liked me to come with him when I started staying. I didn't much like getting up early, but once I was out there, I loved the walks, especially on misty mornings like this one. There was no one about, except a rowing boat or two, and ducks, lots of ducks. There were cows in the meadow, so I had to keep Dog on the lead. I was having a bit of a struggle hanging on to him. There'd always be some kind of rabbit hole he just had to stay behind to investigate, or some molehill he insisted he must make friends with. He was pulling all the time. Funny coincidence, though, Grandpa said suddenly. What is? I asked. That Yarl's Wood place you were talking about last night. I think that could be the detention centre place Grandma used to visit years ago before she got ill. My memory's not what it was, but I think it's called Yarl's Wood. That's probably how I knew about it. She was sort of a befriender there. A befriender? Yes, Grandpa said. She'd go in and talk to the people in there, you know, the asylum seekers, to cheer them up a bit because they were going through hard times. She did that a lot in prisons all her life, but she never said too much about it. She said it upset her too much to talk about it. Once a week or so, she'd go off and make someone a little happier for a while. She was like that. She always said I should do it too. That I'd be good at it, but I never had her courage. It's the idea of being locked up, I suppose, even if you know you can leave whenever you want to. How silly is that? Do you know what Amman wrote in his letter, Grandpa? I said. He told me there'd been 6 locked doors and barbed wire fence between him and the world outside. He had counted them. That was the moment we turned and looked up at one another, and I knew that Grandpa had made up his mind. He was going to do it. We never got to Grantchester. We turned round at once and went home, and Dog did not like that one bit. Grandpa had been a journalist before he retired, so he knew things, or how to find out about these things. As soon as we got back into the house, he was on the phone. He discovered that in order to visit Mrs. Khan and Amman in Yarl's Wood, he had to write a formal letter asking permission. It took a few days before the reply came back. The good news was that they were still in there, and the people at Yarl's Wood had said Grandpa could come on Wednesday, in 2 days' time it was, and that visiting times were between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. I wrote Amman a letter at once telling him Grandpa was coming to visit. I hoped he'd write back or phone. But he didn't, and I couldn't understand that at all. All the way there, I could see Grandpa was a bit nervous. He kept saying how he wished he'd never agreed to do it in the first place. Dog was in the back seat, leaning his head on Grandpa's shoulder, watching the road in front, as he always did. I think Dog would drive this car himself if you let him, I said, trying to cheer Grandpa up a bit. I wish you could come in with me, Matt, he said. Me too, I told him. But you'll be fine, Grandpa, just go for it. And you'll like Amman. He'll remember you, I know he will. And you've got the monopoly, haven't you? He'll beat you, Grandpa. But don't worry about that. He beats everyone. And tell him to write to me, will you? Or text or phone. We were driving up a long, straight hill. It seemed to lead to nowhere. But the sky, only when we reached the top of the rise did we see the gates and the barbed wire fence all around. And they keep kids in there, Grandpa breathed. I'm going to stop there today and not read the next chapter yet. I hope you enjoyed the story so far. I really have. Thank you.